What's going on, everyone? It's Coach Ed, and we're here to talk women's basketball. And there's a little interesting element in the women's basketball world that's going on that I wanted to talk about. Now, it's not directly the WNBA, but it's a correlation. It's it incorporates the WNBA. So we're going to get into that in just a couple of minutes. But before I do that, this segment is sponsored by Wise Consultant Solutions. They're the wise choice to help you get back on track in the financial and credit realm. So make sure you contact them. Thank you, Wise Consultant Solutions, for everything you do. Now, let me put it this way. Two of the top players in the WNBA are working to bring out a domestic league for the WNBA in the off season. Now it's going to cover the time frame of January into March. Now, basically, they're going to take about 30, or they're going to have about 30 players from the W who are going to come and play in a 3-on-3 tournament and a 1-on-1 tournament. I'm going to break it down, set things up in that regard so players can compete. Now, this is so the women have the opportunity to play here domestically in the United States. Instead of going overseas to make money there, they'll be able to do it here, right in the confines of the United States. Now, why, some of you may be asking, would they want to do that? Because you can go internationally, you can make a lot of money, up to, some are making over $1 million or up to $1 million, somewhere in that range. So, and the top WNBA players, they're making up to like $260,000. So, and the salaries range, I think they go down to like $70,000, on the low end of the spectrum, somewhere at $60,000, somewhere in that range. Okay. So for these women to be able to maintain their livelihood and their way of living, they want to go overseas when the WNBA is not in session and make the money. Now, the WNBA is in session roughly from May until September, in that time frame. So, when they're not in season in the WNBA, they go overseas. Now, most of them, when they do that, they're away from their families, their friends, their loved ones. So it's a tough situation for these women. So that's a small part of it. One of the biggest reasons why they're trying to bring this league out, and the two heading this are Breanna Stewart and Lafrisa Collier. All right, so they're two of the top players in the WNBA. But getting back to the reason why is in the CBA for the WNBA and the players, there is a WNBA prioritization clause. All right. Now, this clause basically states that the players, if they go overseas and play, they need to be back by the start of training camp, basically, or May 1st, whichever is later. I believe it is. It says it says the idea behind prioritization was that in return for all the new money that was being given to players, owners wanted greater assurances that players would be available both to play and ideally represent or promote the league year round. So basically, the WNBA wanted to make sure that they were prioritized over the international teams. Now, I get it. I understand it. As a business, you want to make sure that your employees, your commodity does represent you and prioritizes you and is there in those points, in those times, in those situations. But as far as the women, they got to make their money. So their prioritization should be them, their families, and their pockets. Simple as that. But I get it. It's a contract negotiation, and the player signed off for that. You know, it's it's tough for these women because they're not getting paid like the NBA players. They're just not. I mean, even if players are getting paid on the low spectrum in the NBA, they're still making more than the top players in the WNBA far and away. They're probably making double, if not triple, what these women are making. So, and these guys don't have to go overseas to play. They can do that right here in the United States for the most part. Now, there are penalties associated with women who do not come back in time. Now, this went into effect this season in 2023. You know, they're calling it a soft launch. And basically, it was any player who is late to training camp will be fined 1% of their base salary for each day of camp that they miss. So you can figure it out. If you're 260, you figure out what 1% is, and then you go for there, and it's for every day. Any player who has not reported to their WNBA team by the start of the 2023 regular season will be suspended for the entire 2023 season. Now, season's already started. We didn't go through any of that. We didn't have any situations. For the most part, everyone made it back. 2024 is when the full prioritization rule kicks in. For that season and any further years covered by the agreement, players must report by the start of camp or May 1st, whichever is later, or they will be suspended for the entire year. There's no fine, or anything going forward. It's just basically if you're not there, you're suspended for the year. So you're suspended. Of course, you're not going to get paid. So right there, that's a big one. So 2024 is when you're going to be looking to see the full scope of this rule go into effect. Now, the rule does not apply to players with zero, basically players just drafted, 1 year or 2 years of service in the WNBA. So there are players who, are drafted for this year in 2021. They wouldn't have been suspended if they were late in 2023 if they had 2 years or less of service. Going forward, those same players in 2024, they're on the books. There are now you may ask about international players. They're held to the same standards basically. Now they have a choice. They can go play overseas and they can stay there and if they're in their home country is outside the United States, but they're still held to the same rules. Now, can players sign late to avoid suspensions and the fines? No, they can't. If a player signs during the training camp in 2023, they still get retroactively fined as if they're still under contract from the beginning. And if you're still fulfilling overseas player commitments and not signed by the start of the regular season in 23 or before the start of the training camp in 24, they'll become ineligible to sign the contracts. Tough. The WNBA is really playing tough with them. They want this rule because this is what the owners asked for. So they're playing tough with it. They say this is what the owners want. Okay, we're handling it. We're going to abide by what the owners want. And this is the rules. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to play by. Which, I get it. I understand. The other question was, could the team choose not to suspend the players? If they're running late, whatever the case may be. Case in point, if you have your superstar, Breonna Stewart, Aja Wilson, John Cole Jones, anybody who's playing internationally, you know, if they're coming back late, that team is going to want them anyway. Whether it's a full 100% or whether it's 90% or even 80, whatever, they're going to want them there, and they're going to take that. But the WNBA said no. The wording in the CBA says the WNBA shall suspend or the WNBA shall fine. So in other words, they're taking it out of the owners and the team's hands, and they're handling it. So an owner who might say, well, you know what, other teams they might not do it, but you know, I'm gonna try and finagle myself away. I'm gonna finagle around the rule and take advantage of it. No, the WNBA says no, no, you're not going to be able to do that. So now there's more intricate aspects into it. There's other things into it. You can go online and research it. One site that I really saw, if you go to the Her Hoop Stats newsletter and research WNBA prioritizations explained, they'll have everything there. It's a great story. It gives you a detailed explanation. It breaks it all the way down if you want more information on that. But it's tough. It's really tough. I get the business side of it, in terms of the league, they want to be prioritized. The owners, in some regard, they don't have, the money to pay that a lot of these women are getting overseas. So these women are basically being forced to choose, whether it's go overseas and play or basically play here in the United States for less money. So, because if you're basically making 3 times the amount, you basically have to say, I'm going to cut 2/3 of my expenses because I'm not going to make that money that I was making overseas internationally. And it's not fair. It really isn't fair to these women. But in terms of the business side of it, you do understand, and that's where we hopefully are pushing and creating ways for these women to have greater opportunities, more teams, more revenue, TV contracts, all of that their salaries increase, and these women can, be able to play, increase the roster size, because right now, you have 12 teams and there's a cap of either 11 or there's up to 12 players on the roster. But depending on your salary cap, it's 11. So basically, if we just say every team has 12 players times 12 teams, that's 144 players. Now, getting back to the new league, it's called the Unrivaled. That is being generated. Basically, this, like I said earlier, it's a league where you're going to have a 3-on-3 and a 1-on-1 type of a tournament. But if you take a look at it, I believe it's going to, take 30 players total from the WNBA and break them up to fit into that. But if you take that 30 women out of 144, that's 114 that are not being able to participate in this. So that's also tough. So if some of those women are caught up where they can't go overseas to make that money, then what? Some are going to find, everyone is going to do what they need to do to make ends meet in their lives. I get it. I understand that. And that's true. Whether it's some are going to, take certain coaching jobs or take a certain office job or whatever it is in their field of expertise based on, their college degree. There's avenues. I understand that. And yes, they're going to be in some regards fine. But it's also, if you break it down and you look at it, these women are going through so much to play a sport that they love, just like the men do. And it's really not fair. I mean, I find it difficult. If my granddaughter grows up to want to play basketball and wants to go to the WNBA, hopefully by the time she gets there, things are going to be different. But as it currently stands, it's not going to be that way for her, and it's going to be tough as a grandfather. Seeing her go through so many different things. Say she does go overseas to compete, and I want to see her. If I don't have the money, I can't go see her. So it's just little things like that. And to me, the easiest, the most practical way of attacking this is getting the funding and the support into the WNBA. And if we're going to go with the Unrivaled, Collier and Stewart, they're looking for sponsors. They're looking for donations. That's what they're trying to generate to raise the money to be able to pay these women so that they can go ahead and play in the Unrivaled here in the United States. Because the league, and the other thing is, the league is going to be playing down in Miami. Hey, most women and most people would love that, going down to Miami, January to March. If you're in the Northeast, that's the cold time of the year. So hey, what better way to go than to go down south into Miami, warmer weather, beautiful sceneries. But the bottom line is, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to raise the money to be able to do that. And somehow, some way, we need to, as a whole society, get behind these women. And it seems like we're headed that way. It's just a slow process, but I'm hoping it does step up, because I've always believed in the women's game. I love the women's game. They play some great basketball. So that's pretty much my take on this. I just wanted to dive into that and speak on that. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break, and I will be back after this.